Hello and welcome to this new video. Today we are going to talk about Cachy OS, the operating system offering you 10 to 20% more performance. How is that possible? Coming up. So yes, today we are talking about Cachy OS. It's a really impressive operating system. It's Arch based. We're gonna do a full review of it right now. But just before starting, I need to say that my goal with those videos are twofold. First of all, I want you guys to be able to know if you want to try, if you want to use it, because, well, there's a lot of Linux distro out there, and we never know if we really want to use something or just skip it. Now, that's the first question that I want to answer, and the second one, of course, I want to help maybe the devs see things from my perspective, from another perspective, and of course improve their OS. So let's start the review because there's a lot of things to talk about. And let's start with the install, where I think Cachy OS does it in a really good manner. So what's good about their install? The way they do it, they really do it like a vanilla install of Arch. Now, there is multiple ways to install Linux, install a Linux distro. When you use Arch, if you do a vanilla install of Arch, the way that you do it is you're using Packstrap, which will pretty much inject into your system a very small Arch base, and then you will shroot inside of that system base. For those who don't know, shrooting is pretty much when you enter the other install while still using your kernel and all of your driver, meaning that you're inside of the other install in pretty much every way, but you don't need to use the kernel that is there and the drivers, so it makes it, well, possible for you to make change even if there's nothing in the install. So that's how a vanilla install is done, and this is how Cachy OS does it. Now, the way that I see a lot of people do Arch install and pretty much any Linux install is to just take a big ISO, put everything in the image, and dump it on the drive. Now, the reason why that is an issue for an Arch install is because the older your ISO gets, the more vulnerable it gets. Because a big reason why Arch crashes has those, well, we know Arch has a tendency to self-implode and to die for no reason. A big reason why that is, well, when you wait too long for an update and the two versions of your program are so different from one another that the config doesn't work anymore and now you're having an issue. Or some part of the of your software is has a way too big of an upgrade and now there's an incompatibility with the configs or with other software. This is where issues start and where problem is most of the time with Arch. Now, a big problem with other installs is that because they have this image, this way of doing the image, they just inject the image, you restart, you do your update, and you already have a bunch of update to do. And because you're doing those updates, you're already at a risk of, well, breaking your system out of the box, which is a big issue. Now, Cachy OS sidesteps this because when you do your install, you're actually never having something that's outdated on your system because they don't take the information from the hard drive, they take it from their repository or Arch repository, meaning they have the latest always installed on your system. For me, at least, that's the best way to go because it makes it so your ISO, your install file, is way smaller. It's 2.8 gigs, while most install will be around 6 gig or over. And it has, of course, the big drawback of needing you to have networked installed on your system to be able to, of course, download from the internet the actual packages, but that's not an issue, at least for me. I believe that in 2024, if you're still having problems having the internet on your computer at install time, it's a you problem. I'm sorry, it's just true. We're not there anymore. We don't have problem with drivers anymore for network hardware. So if you can't have the internet on your PC, well, just don't use that OS. I mean, come on. So that's a big plus for me now. Yes, we can go a little bit into that. I know that a lot of OS have the install model where they put all in their ISO and they just dump the image on the file. The only reason why it's a problem with Arch, and pretty much only with Arch, is because of that issue where when you do your update, you have chances where it may brick your system. An Ubuntu, that wouldn't be an issue, because even if you have a 1-year-old LTS distro and you install it, well, because it's LTS and because all of the updates are thought about they have in their mind, well, it really needs to be unbreakable, it needs to be perfect, because they think about this when they do updates with their package. You're pretty much guaranteed to not have issues with that kind of install. So that's kind of an Arch problem, or any real bleeding edge distro. But anyway, I really like how Cachy OS does it. You can select your desktop environment at install time. So you want KDE, you select KDE, you want GNOME, you select GNOME. It makes everything way simpler, and for me at least, way better. So that's one part that I really liked. Now, there was a little mistake, a little problem with my install. It went into sleep while I was installing it, and when you're booting from a USB key and your computer goes to sleep, most of the time your computer won't wake up. So that's what happened with mine. I had to install it again and make sure that my computer doesn't go to sleep. I'm not really blaming the devs for this, because I mean, everybody that has worked long enough with with Linux pretty much has had the same issues with their OS at one moment or another. There's pretty much 15 systems that can try to put your computer to sleep, and sometimes, well, you forget one of them, and that happens. So that's a small issue. I know that on their forum they have already addressed the issue and they're going to fix it in their next image, so that's not a big issue. I just want you to know that it happened. Now, let's continue after the install. So when you first boot up after the install, what you see is a menu where you have a couple of options. Now, we're going to do some comparison to Garuda, because, well, Garuda is the last OS that I reviewed. If you want, you can go watch the video, of course. But Garuda was made to be easy to use, and it really showed in their menu. When you boot the computer, you had a big menu with all of the options that made Arch as easy and newbie friendly as possible. So you don't really have the same thing with Cachy OS. Cachy OS pretty much gives you a small interface to be able to add some programs, and that's it. So it's not really easy to use. The install process is really great, but I would never say that Cachy OS is a newbie-friendly distro, because it really doesn't try to be. It's an Arch install. If you want to use Arch and have the advantages of Cachy OS, well, you can use it, but it's not easy to use besides the install. So that's the first part that I wanted to talk about, because their menu isn't really that great. Now, a big claim to fame from Cachy OS is their optimization. So let's delve a little bit into that. Let's start by ZRAM. If you've watched my other review, you know that I kind of have a problem with the way that most people use ZRAM. Now, for those who don't know, ZRAM is a utility that will compress your RAM, compress whatever you have into RAM to be able to make more place for more stuff to be put into RAM. In theory, it's supposed to be faster than swap being RAM that's made from your disk. RAM from your disk is really slow, so the idea of trying to fit more by compressing your memory is really appealing because it can make for a faster system when your system lacks memory. Now, when you set up ZRAM, you have multiple options. You can either say use half my RAM, use only 1 gig of RAM. You can set it up a little bit however you want. Now, the way that Cachy OS has set their ZRAM up, they have set up exactly like Garuda, and I really don't like how they do it. They've given all of the RAM to ZRAM, meaning if you put something into RAM, it will be compressed, and if you need to get something out of the RAM, it will need to be decompressed. That's, for me, a really bad way to do it, because you can easily fall into, well, a computer that has been built with sanity in mind, that has been built with the right amount of RAM into it, and that doesn't need ZRAM, but will be slowed down by ZRAM. Because, of course, if you're compressing your memory to be able to, compressing and decompressing your memory to be able to use it, you're slowing down your computer, and, well, you're doing it for nothing. If you have, let's say, 8 gigs of RAM and you only use 6 gig of RAM, well, good job, you've slowed your computer for literally no gain. So that's kind of my issue with using the full memory for ZRAM, is that, well, it doesn't really serve any purpose. It just slows down your computer, and when you're using an OS really only to be able to get more performance, it seems kind of counterproductive to make a measure that will probably slow your computer down if it has been made with some sense into it. Now, I just need to state that ZRAM isn't a bad thing to have. It's really useful when you lack memory. So if you need 10 gigs and you only have 8 gigs, ZRAM is pretty much your savior. If your workload is compressible, it's your savior because it will make everything, of course, way faster than the equivalent in swap. I actually want to make a future video where I will test all of those theories with SSD so that we can have a final word on it and see the performance differences, but that's the next video. Let's finish Cachy OS before doing this one. So that's it for ZRAM. Now you know my thought on it. So that's a part that I don't really like, and if we continue, we can go into the scheduler. Now, Cachy OS uses a special scheduler called MQ Deadline. Now, let's make parallels, of course, with Garuda. Garuda uses the BFQ. Both scheduler pretty much works in the same way. They take a little bit of performance to be able to achieve lower latencies. Now, let me just explain quickly. The scheduler is the part of the system that pretty much tells, okay, you're gonna take that memory at that moment, or you're gonna go in the hard drive at that moment, or you're going to execute that task at that moment. It's the part of the system that says what happens when to try to optimize things. So normally, a standard Linux scheduler won't really care about what happens when, so it will just do it in the same in the same way that it comes in, not really enforcing any special latency or anything of that sort. Now, those new generation scheduler, what they do is just always have a little bit of space to be able to have lower latency. So that's why they have less performance but lower latency. So it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off that will really pay when your CPU is at 100%. So let's say you're gaming, your CPU is at 100%, you're gonna have way better performance because of that scheduler. It's going to feel way more fluid because you're not going to have that, a small part of your game being slowed down at a crazy like half a second time to be processed because the scheduler is just waiting on it. While if you have MQ Deadline, it's going to be way faster. So that's where the advantage can be. Now, let's just discuss a little bit of the alternative. There's a big problem. I don't really like the whole scheduler as an optimization because it's kind of true and it's kind of false at the same time. if your CPU isn't at 100%, there's really no real gain that those scheduler give you. In reality, they even, well, penalize you a little bit because, well, they need performance to work. And if we go one step further than that, like I said, the scheduler isn't only for the CPU, it's also for your RAM and for your hard drive. If you have a traditional hard drive, it makes sense to have those new generation scheduler because MQ Deadline or BFQ will be able to better queue things to make your hard drive work smarter. Now, if you have an SSD, that's not the case. The scheduler, the way that it tries to manage the hard drive, it's not more efficient. It doesn't really matter in what order you get information from an SSD. Thus, it doesn't really matter what the hell this scheduler does with that. Now, what it means in reality is that if you want the best performance IO-wise, so only thinking about the hard drive and not the CPU, you should really have no scheduler at all. So that's kind of a part that is weird about this discussion, is that a lot of distribution will talk about how optimized their scheduler is, but in reality, you are losing out if you have a good CPU and if you have a good SSD. Well, you're pretty much losing out on performance by having a scheduler in and of itself. So that's kind of a part that I feel kind of weird when I see everybody start to be overjoyed about the scheduler. It's not always a great idea to actually even have one. So that's a part that we need to consider. Now, they also have custom kernels, and it's really easy to install them. They have a lot of choice. Not really have a lot to say about it, because it will be, well, I will talk a little bit about that later, about their big claim to fame and optimization. That's for the end, but let's continue down the list of things that we want to talk about. They also have done a switch. I swear to God, they've done this switch only for me. They now use BTRFS. Before they used XFS. Now, for those who follow me, you know that I don't really like BTRFS on SSD. The reason why I don't like BTRFS on SSD is that, well, it's the slowest FS, it's the slowest file system on SSD. That's just a fact. BTRFS has always been slow with SSDs. They are really great with HDD. That's undebatable. If you want the best performance for an HDD, you use BTRFS, but for an SSD, well, you use anything else than BTRFS. Now, if we again compare to Garuda Linux, Garuda had this big interface and setup where they made, when you made an update, you had an automatic backup, and that backup you could restore automatically with even in Grub, meaning that everything was made so that like I said in the video, I kind of accept their use of BTRFS. Now, I'm not really as lenient with Cachy OS because they haven't implemented in any way BTRFS. So you pretty much have BTRFS as a default, and if you're using an SSD, well, have fun with the lower performance. Now, to be honest, I know BTRFS is really popular with a lot of distro. Fedora uses it, but the thing is, Fedora isn't claiming to be an high-performance distro. It's just claiming to have a lot of capabilities, to be stable, and all of that. So that's why I don't really care if Fedora uses it. But Cachy OS, whose goal is to try to achieve maximum performance, well, you should probably try to check what hard drive your user is using and decide accordingly. But anyway, that's I know that I'm in a losing battle because nobody thinks like thinks like me on that one. But yeah, when you're installing, select something else than BTRFS, unless you want the backups option. But yes, so that's something that I find a little bit sad. Now, to go on, they also have their own web browser. I don't like that. They have their Cachy OS web browser. Like I've said before, having a custom web browser is, in my eyes, a big liability, because you're putting yourself, well, in reality, the place where people get hacked, the place where people have a lot of issue is the browser. You're not getting hacked through your Linux. You're not going to get a virus on your Linux. That's not going to happen. But those things will happen with your browser. And putting yourself out there, saying that you're going to pretty much make your browser, even if it's a fork of Firefox, saying that you're going to put your branding on it and all of this, I don't really like the idea. I don't want anybody to be in the middle of, well, modifying my browser. If you want to add something to the browser, being, a distro maker, you should really look at adding things with an add-on and just leaving Firefox blank if you want to use Firefox. But making your own, in my eyes, it's a liability. It's something that if anything goes wrong, if somebody doesn't look the GitHub commit and there's a virus now, or those kind of big issues that can happen, well, it becomes dumb pretty quickly. Now, I'm not accusing Cachy OS of doing anything creepy or anything of the sort, but it's just something that, why are you putting yourself in this position? It doesn't need to be that way, and frankly, everybody, especially Linux users, like their browser differently. Some people don't even like Firefox, but if you like Firefox, you probably have a slew of add-ons that you like, or even a special brand of Firefox that you like, where everybody's just going to change your default OS, your default web browser anyway. Why are you putting yourself into this position? Just put them Firefox, and if you want to change the default page, do that. That's not of the order of changing the source code. That's changing a small config. That's something else. I don't see any issue with that. So that's it for the browser. Now let's go to their big claim to fame that some people are at the edge of their seat, being, why the hell isn't he talking about it? Cachy OS actually has an optimization that no other OS, well, that I know of, currently has, is the fact that they have compiled a big part of their softwares with x86, 64-bit, v3 and v4 optimization. What the hell did I just said right now? Well, let's go back in history a little bit. Intel, well, yes, it's in majority Intel that came up with those ideas. Anyway, back in the days, Intel saw that their x86 architecture was trash. So what was their solution to it? Well, let's make it even more convoluted and complicated. So how does this help in any way? Well, they added some special function that makes simple things faster, but that couldn't be implemented in the same way. Meaning that if you have, now that's probably not true what I'm saying, but that's just an example to have an image in your mind. Let's say that normally you would do a division in, it would take 11 steps, 11 cycles to do it. Now maybe they have a special command when you use it and you give that information in such a way, the division can be done in 3 steps. Because it uses another part of the silicon, another part of the CPU that is faster. Now, of course, that part of the CPU that is faster cannot be used everywhere, but it's still faster, and if we compile our software for it, they can use it and, well, be 10 to 20% faster. So that's where the big claim that this OS can be 10 to 20% faster comes from, is that they compiled most of their base software through those optimization and have their custom repo, their custom repository, where they have this software either pre-compiled or with the package file to compile it with those optimization. So it's not every CPU that has those optimization. Now, I am lucky enough to have an i5 4th gen, which benefits of the V3 optimization. Now, I know that on the AMD side, those optimization came way later. AMD were, well, let's not lie, back in those days, AMD was trash, but they were also doing some other things for optimization, which didn't end up as universal as what Intel did. But yes, so we're not talking about AMD because I don't know when they have applied those patches, but if you have a CPU Intel 4th gen or earlier, you can benefit from a performance boost, and some even earlier, younger gen of CPUs can have even better performance. Now, it has been tested. We have tests on Phoronix that have tested the performance, and some places you see no performance gain, other you see 10%, other you see 20%. So that's where this number comes from. Now, does this apply everywhere? That's a little bit of the catch. No, it doesn't apply everywhere. It only applies to the actual code that you compile with those optimization in mind, meaning the code that Cachy OS has in their repo and has modified to be able to run with those optimization. So it doesn't really change anything if you have a Steam library, let's say, and you're playing games. Your games aren't going to be faster. What is going to be faster is your desktop, probably your compression software, your compiling software. Those are going to be optimized and are going to be great. Because of course we all enjoy 10 to 20% performance gain, but when you're gaming, it should, at the end of the day, pretty much change nothing, because in reality, sorry, I hit my mic right there. When you're gaming, the back of your OS isn't really doing anything, so your desktop environment isn't taking it's not even taking 3% while you're gaming. So even if you had an optimization of 50%, well, wow, if it was taking 3% of your CPU before, now it's using 1.5%. Who the hell cares? You understand that optimization is really cool, but it's also not something that you should throw yourself to. So that's a little bit what I feel with Cachy OS. The big thing with Cachy OS is that yes, it's really cool that they have this optimization for V3 and V4 optimization of the architecture. It's just that I feel that it's a little bit, not gimmicky, but I don't really see why I should care about this. Now, there is potential there, and that's a little bit where I feel weird about this, is that their install is really great, and the optimization with the V3 and the V4 is clearly something that can be great to a great number of Arch-based distro. So I know that it's probably not going to happen because people like to have their independent team, but it would be really, really fun if Cachy OS would just ally with Garuda Linux, because Garuda, in a lot of ways, have what Cachy doesn't have, and Cachy has what Garuda doesn't have. Meaning that Garuda on optimization, well, they have some of the similar optimization and thoughts about how they want to run their optimization, but Garuda doesn't have the V3 and V4 optimization, so there they could really gain from it. And Garuda also has the way of making an install where they dump the image. That's really bad, so if only they would take that part of Cachy OS, and Garuda could help by having the user friendliness of Garuda, could help by having the way that BTRFS is set up to be really easy to use, the automatic backups and all of that. So if only they would fuse together, it would be insane. I would really like to fiddle around with that OS where it's easy to use, it's well set up, you have some crazy optimization that you don't really see anywhere, because in reality, in the Linux world, nobody's got that optimization down right now. Now, maybe if you're using, I know that Intel has their Linux distro, they probably use this optimization a little bit everywhere, but Intel is Intel, so we're not going to talk about them. But Ubuntu has said that they maybe want to venture into the V3 optimization, not the V4, but maybe they said that last year, and right now we don't really know where it's going. So right now there is a place for Cachy OS to have this novel idea of V3 and V4 optimization. So I find it great. I just don't find nothing else to say about it besides the good install process. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any other OS that you want to have a review of, or any other idea of software to test or to do benchmarks, I'm open. I really like doing those. Now, Cachy OS was a really fun OS to do. I really like their project. I'm just not really much of an Arch user in reality. But right now, next videos, for those who like spoilers, we have a test for ZRAM to see what performance gain or destruction of performance we have by using it on a computer that shouldn't have it, or on a computer that really should have it. So we will test with different RAM configs, with different workloads. So that's going to be really fun, but that takes a lot of time. So it may take a couple of days before the next video. Anyway, so that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. And of course, take care.